Greetings, friends, and happy Valentine's Day to you. Here we are in various different parts of the world collecting on this internet platform and sharing some ideas about embracing self-love today. After all, we spend a lot of time thinking about others on Valentine's Day, and the kids are taught to write out these little Valentines and hand them out to all their friends and stuff. And I don't remember as a child or even as an adult ever having anyone suggest to me that I should think about embracing self-love. And, I'm 70 years old. So, I thought maybe it's time for us to start doing that. And so we had our conversation, we talked about it, and we decided that that's what we're going to talk about today, embracing self-love. So I'm going to just ask my co-hosts to introduce themselves. And today, Scott, I'd like to start with you.
Well, thank you very much, David. Wonderful to see everybody here on Valentine's Day. Scott Holmes. I'm a quantum energy healer out of the Boston area. I deal with those that want to find the healing within themselves. Self-love is a big part of that. With everybody that I work with, it's the most important part because that's how we step forward in life. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Scott. And Sarah, please share with us who you are, what you are, where you live, and so forth.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane, and I live in the UK, so a few miles away from my co-hosts. I work with energy as well, in the form of Reiki and vocal Reiki using sound. And I support people to heal the inner child, especially the inner child of pain, hurt, trauma. And actually one of the things that I've discovered in the working on myself as much as anything else, but I support others to do, is to reconnect to that inner child and to help them feel loved. And there's a lovely quote by a lady called Alice Little, and I never get it perfect. As a traumatized child, you're waiting for that person who will come and rescue you. What you never understood was that it would be yourself as an adult. And that's the you of today, taking so much love to the younger self, that the younger self starts to love themselves, feeling loved by you, which is themselves. And it is a very powerful energy. So very much, but I was never, ever taught to love myself. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And I noticed you talked about self-care in your little comment there. So I think that you've already begun the process of bringing us into this idea of self-love. Gail, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gail Nowak. I am also in the Boston area, a little north of Scott. I guide New Earth leaders who are creating collective change to become a more loving leader with themselves and others so they can uplift humanity with their magic. And I do that through energy first, healing centered coaching and retreats that support you in being the bold, authentic, and potent leader that you were born to be. And I also just wanted to thank Sarah for sharing that little bit about being the traumatized child and then really becoming your own hero in your story and being that source of love for yourself. I think that we'll probably touch on that more in our conversation today. And I hope that that's really a big takeaway for those who are listening, is that we can source that love from within. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
I'm sorry about that. I think you can probably hear my dog barking in the background. Somebody just rang the doorbell, and obviously I'm not in a position to answer that right now. I'm sure they'll go away. Anyway, so I want to just say thank you all for being here. And I also want to welcome Elise and anybody else who shows up on the live presentation. If you have comments or questions that, please feel free to write them in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to those. I wanted to just briefly introduce myself here. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery Coach, and I live in the Boise Meridian area. And I think my focus is really about helping people to learn how to connect or reconnect, I should say, to the truth of who they really are. We spend so much time in our lives living up to other people's expectations, responding to the demands of society and so on, taking on different roles and you name it, that we sometimes forget. We sometimes identify ourselves with those roles, with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our health. I mean, we say, I am sick, or I am an alcoholic, or I am this, or I am that. We identify with our illnesses. And this is really, I think, in the long run, a very unhealthy practice. And so my work is really about helping people to strip away all those false identities and come back to the truth of who they really are. So that's what I do. And I'm particularly excited today because I have been working for 2 years on a website called Magnificence Life Mastery School. And today it's going live. So, and I chose today very specifically because it's all about self-love. So I'll share a little bit more about that with you later. But I want to get into this topic, this idea of self-love. I'd like to begin by asking a general question. Why do you think we have so much problem with the idea of loving ourselves? Where did that come from? And how do we begin to unravel that thought process, that belief system? Who would like to answer that first? Scott, go ahead.
You say that, and I just have to smile because I was always taught in the role that as a father, as a dad, as the breadwinner, as bringing home the bacon, that you sacrificed everything that you had for your family. In other words, it was always to the serving end of it. My mother also, who was at home, she was a stay-at-home mom. And it was all about serving the people that you love around you and showing that by doing. Mm-hmm. Did the laundry, did the outside, did the inside. She painted, she gardened, she did the clothes, she provided for the kids, she did everything. And in that way, that's how she showed love. She had a hard time accepting anything and receiving. And that's how I was taught all the way through my growing up. So it's always been very, very hard for me, even still, to accept those things, that receiving part of it. And I found out that it's because that I was taught not to bring to myself. In the last few years, I've taught other people how to do that while I'm learning how to do it myself. And that is giving myself time, giving myself a breath, giving myself those things. I would always overextend to give to other people. I would take away from me to give to other people to make sure they were okay. So self-love has been a real boundary. It's been a real tough road to get over. And in the class I was teaching last week, we talked about forgiveness and about self-forgiveness in the same manner. That the hardest part, it's easy to forgive other people, much easier than to forgive yourself for those things because you have a higher standard. You know yourself, you know all the arguments because they're in your head. You know, you kind of lose those battles. And it comes down to self-love, truly, 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 and living with grace. A friend of mine says that allow yourself grace. And that is how she practices self-love, by giving the same consideration to herself that she does to those people around her and allowing that part. And Sarah, you always talk about balance, right? The balance we were talking about, it's that part of it. is treating yourself as well as you treat everybody else. And that, for me, is the beginning of self-love.
Yeah, beautiful. You know, as you were talking, I noticed that one of the things that I was taught was it's better to give than to receive. And which implied that you have to give love, but you're not allowed to receive it. So that was a very, very strong teaching in my life. And I know that I actually think that that comes from some kind of biblical or religious teaching. And I don't remember exactly where it comes from, but I think it's 100% wrong. I actually have now come to believe that it is actually better to receive than to give, because when I receive, I am giving you the opportunity to give to me. It is a double-barreled giving process that most people don't even understand. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. Gail, Sarah, what would you like to add to that about how you got to be in this place, or how anybody got to be in this place?
Gail, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For me personally, I think I had a lot of confusion around what love in general really is. I'm not sure that I really had great models of that growing up. I've had to do a lot of inner work to really grasp not only this concept of self-love, but what is actually loving, and the different aspects of that, the spectrum of that, right? Because I think that it can be really easy to Scott's point, to think that falling on your sword and sacrificing your own needs and wants is loving, but it's really not loving. And I think that is a really distorted message in our society, that to just give at your own expense, like that's a noble thing. Well, not really, because then eventually you're going to be drained and depleted, and what are you actually giving at that point? And so, from a personal perspective, this whole journey of self-love for me was really, to what Sarah was saying, is learning how to reparent myself and give myself the love that I needed but didn't necessarily receive, because parents are we hope they're doing the best that they can. I've shared parts of my story of growing up in a dysfunctional family and all of that. And there's a part of me that believes that they were doing the best that they could with what they had.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably didn't have models either around, like, what is healthy love? What is self-love? I know, my mom sacrificed a lot, and I witnessed that and I lived with that. And I think I rebelled against it a little bit, but it seeps in. So I think a lot of it has to do with our upbringing and our childhood, but I also think that there's a lot of judgment in society about putting focus on yourself. And I know that we kind of talked about this in our planning meeting, like this whole idea that taking care of yourself is somehow a selfish thing, when in fact it's the least selfish thing you could do.
Right. Yeah. Sarah.
What is love? Because, to be perfectly honest, I don't think I ever knew. I really don't. What happened to me happened as a very young child. It left me feeling unwanted, unloved, not good enough, unworthy. Every thing you can think about, it probably left me feeling. 3 months in hospital, seeing your parents for an hour once a week does not help you feel part of a family and feel loved. It just doesn't. And this is where that quote from Alice Little made so much sense to me. So it wasn't just a matter of learning to love yourself. It's trying to learn what is love. What does that actually mean to each and every one of us? And everything starts with us. And so loving ourselves is how we can truly bring love to others. So many of us have been brought up with it. Everybody else has to come first. The doing for everyone else. We aren't doings, we're beings. And we haven't been there for ourselves. And I know that I wasn't for 2 marriages and a bit more, sort of. But how many people need a wake-up call to help them to start to understand how valuable and precious and special and unique they are? They have gifts to bring to the world. And it's that accepting who you are, whether you understand that word love or not. But I do remember working with a client one day, and I was standing at their head, and I don't hear voices, I don't see things. I've said this before, and I really don't. But the words were suddenly in my head. I am the love of my life. And I knew that wasn't just for the client on the couch. It was for me, and it was for everybody else in this world.
Absolutely.
And I believe those words come from a very much higher place. For me, they've got to come from source, because we're talking about love here.
Right.
And love is who we are. We should be the love of our own lives. We should be able to say yes to ourselves and no to others. It is so important to be able to be true and honest to who you are. And it's that acceptance of, but I'm saying no to somebody, but when we've been so used to saying yes the whole time and discounting what may be going through our own heads and our own hearts, more to the point is our own hearts. But realizing that when we say no to others and yes to ourselves, we're actually empowering 2 people. We are empowering ourselves because we aren't doing for others, we are taking care of ourselves. But we are empowering the other individual because we've stopped doing for them, and we encourage them to do for themselves and live their life for themselves, not to try and do it through others. It's about our growth, their growth. And we can hold people back, and at the same time, we'll hold ourselves back if we don't come from a place of love. I mean, of love, which can be, when we've talked about it before, the tough love.
Right. And you're reminding me of a friend of mine who's a shadow work facilitator. And he has a beautiful combination of phrases that he shares with people when they're at the deepest part of their shadow suffering, if you like. And what he reminds them, now I'm going to get these words all mangled up. I'm not going to get them quite right. But basically, it's along the lines of, you may have a dysfunctional way of loving people because you don't know any better. Or you may have a perfectly functional way of loving people because you have learned how to love. But it doesn't matter, because love you will, because love you are. Now, I remember the first time I heard that, it just right into my heart. Even though he wasn't working with me, he was working with somebody else. I thought, wow, that is so beautiful. And I think, Gail, to your point of not knowing what love is, it's exactly the same thing as not knowing who you are yourself. When you know yourself, then you know yourself as love. And then you can begin to start to expand into that and learn functional ways of sharing your love, right? This is what we can all do. This is a powerful, powerful conversation, And so, Sarah, you're absolutely right. We have to learn also to say yes and no and be honest about it. And I say sometimes I have to say no to myself too. Because sometimes when I'm saying yes to myself, I'm simply looking at self-gratification or some other thing like that, which may not in fact be good for me. And so I have to come from my heart and say, is this the right choice for me right now? Whether anybody else is involved or not. And I just say yes or no. So I sometimes have to say no to myself. And that I have found also empowers me, because I realize when I say no to myself, I'm actually saying no to my ego mind that is trying to get me to do something that I don't necessarily want to do. Right? So this is all about raising awareness about every aspect of our life and becoming more conscious about how we show up in every moment. That's how I see it. I would like to, does anybody have anything else to say? Because I really would like to share a little exercise with everyone. But I want to make sure I'm not stopping someone from speaking first. So this idea of self-love is sometimes difficult for people to embrace. Even when you have people like us who are helping you and are helping, hopefully raising your awareness about what self-love is really all about, you may still have some resistance. And so this exercise is really designed to help you come around the backside towards self-love, if you like. Now that may sound a little weird, but just trust me for a few minutes. So I'm going to ask everyone to just take a couple of deep breaths and close your eyes. Just let yourself be present in the moment. And allow your awareness to rest on someone in your life who is really important, someone who you really love. It could be a spouse, could be a child, it could be a parent, could be a friend. Doesn't matter. Just allow that person's presence to come into your awareness. And just notice how you feel as if that person is right there across from you, looking at you and just being present with you. Notice how you feel in your body. Do you feel cold, warm? Do you feel is there a color that shows up when this person is present? Is there a vibration that you feel? Is there a sound in your mind that shows up? Is there a scent, a smell? Just notice how your body is responding to this person. And now I'm going to ask you to look more deeply into this person. And in your mind's eye, see all of those amazing qualities of this person that you love so much. What is it about this person that really gets you excited to be with him or her? And when I say excited, I'm not talking about a sexual excitement. I'm just talking about the idea of really enjoying being present with this person. So just allow yourself to notice that. And maybe come up with 2 or 3 qualities, characteristics, aspects, whatever you want to call them, that really get you warmed up and motivated and inspired to be with this person. Now I'm going to ask you to just allow your awareness to let that person leave this space, but keep your attention on those qualities that you found so valuable. So now you're in this same space by yourself, and what I would like you to do is find those qualities within yourself. Whatever they are. Scan your body, scan your heart, scan your soul, and just take a couple of moments, a couple of minutes to look around and spot those qualities within yourself. And ask yourself this question. Since I love those qualities so much in that other person, can I love those qualities equally within myself? And if they're qualities that maybe you don't have as much access to as you would like, give yourself an opportunity and invite yourself to embrace these qualities more fully and start to express them in your life. Ask yourself, am I willing to take this quality as my own and begin expressing it in my life? Now, if you can do that, then you are already on the path towards self-love. And if you can practice this a few times a week, perhaps, just sit quietly in your own sacred space and do this little exercise. You will discover that there are many, many qualities within yourself that you might not have acknowledged before. And so I invite you now to just open your eyes, take another couple of deep breaths. And if you feel like writing some stuff down, please go ahead and do that. Take some notes for yourself for whatever benefit. And if you feel like sharing, I would love to hear how that worked for you. What did you get out of it? Sarah?
As I've explained about my early life, I was not much over a year old when my sister Gillian was born. And that was after I'd come out of hospital. And I just got the sense that I didn't feel I had love in my life at that point in time. But when my sister came along, I was able to give her the love that I felt had been rejected by my parents. I know it hadn't. Adults can understand these things, children can't. And so when you sort of said about qualities, etc., it wasn't about qualities, because this was a tiny baby who actually died when she was 9 weeks old. So it was the innocent love of a child for a child. It wasn't about anything other than still being connected with the love of Source, the love of our soul, the love of who we are. And being that's how I perceive things. And it was wonderful to be able to get a sense and a feel of that without having to put, for want of a better word, labels on it, because it just was what it was. And it was that, okay, let that individual go, and those qualities. But for me, it was that child who loved, who felt they'd had it rejected. They loved again, and sadly felt they had it rejected again. But to be in that space in the middle where she could actually feel that love for somebody and feel it was being returned.
Beautiful. Thank you. Scott, go ahead.
So you had asked about certain qualities that, for me, my significant other, or as SOs, as people have called them, and she's empathic, and so what comes through always is compassion, trust, honesty, and most of all, love. I've showered in love. And at first, when those things were presented to me, I didn't really know how to handle them. Honestly, they were just kind of overwhelming. And when you asked to take those same things and bring them in, to find them in me, I realized that I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Forget about it. I'm 180 degrees reversed. But those qualities are within me now. And because of the relationship that we have, I always say that she's smoothed my rough edges. She has given me more compassion, more understanding, I trust more. I love differently and show how I love differently, and giving people space, creating space for them, and being honest. When you're so busy giving so much of yourself to everybody else, there's not a lot of honesty there. Hey, can you do this? Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. Putting off the 3 things that I wanted to do or needed to do or felt that I had to do. And not using your voice, not finding your voice, not finding that part of you that's really elemental, the soul. And so thank you for the exercise, David. It was absolutely marvelous. But it also highlights, we can see those things in other people so easily, so readily, because they're out there. We can see them, touch them, feel them. But it's much harder to find within ourselves. And when we do, there's a gift.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Gail, did you want to share?
Yeah. Whew. Yikes. David, this was super healing for me. So I want to thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a couple people popped in as I was visualizing, and then there was this specific person who popped in, and yet at the end of the exercise, I feel like I'm experiencing some healing with my parents. So fascinating, really fascinating. I feel like I'm coming full circle, and different characteristics came up, but the one that I'm really feeling deeply is joy. And I wouldn't necessarily connect joy and love together. And I remember I would say like maybe an 8 or a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, I remember having a conversation with a friend and saying, my parents don't love me. And just being so sure about that. And my dad was an absentee dad. My parents got divorced when I was a baby. So, I spent some time with him, but there wasn't really a big, strong bond there. And this is all fascinating that this is happening this week, because he just sent me this beautiful bouquet of flowers. And I feel like our relationship has definitely gotten better, the older I get. And I feel like he's in a much better place for himself, but he also shows up as a healthy masculine energy in my life. So anyway, I was also thinking about like this quality of joy. And Sarah, I know you're into names, and actually my name means my father's joy. And it's, for me, that takes on a double meaning, right? Like literally my father, but also my, father, mother, father, creator, right?
Right.
And so this is a theme that's really been kind of circling around these last few years. And as we were kind of sharing and everything, I also had this memory of a letter that my mom sent me. Now, my mom passed away a few months ago. So I kind of feel like she's here with me right now and kind of tapping me on the shoulder and saying, remember that letter that I sent you? And it was a letter in response to me basically saying, I need a break. And in that letter, her also saying, apologizing and saying, I'm sorry that you felt that you weren't loved because you were my pride and joy.
Mm-hmm.
So, whew, some really deep stuff coming up, David. But you know, like I'm not sure I would have been able to access all of that without really learning, like what does that mean to love myself? Like how do we go about loving ourselves so we can receive, you know, that those direct messages and then sort of like those intuitive messages, like you were saying, Scott, like it was hard for you to receive at first.
Yeah.
And when we learn to love ourselves, we're able to fully receive. So beautiful exercise. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for participating. So I'm sure everybody realizes what this was all about. It was an exercise in understanding and making use of our own projections. Projection is a powerful tool. It's something people don't understand is everything about our lives is projection. All right. And that sounds crazy when you first hear it. I know it certainly sounded crazy to me when I first thought about it. But then when I started meditating on it, I realized, well, the way I came to understand it as a truism is I just imagined myself being absolutely alone, not having any other beings of any kind, no environment. In other words, I'm in this empty room, if you like, that has no color, no atmosphere, nothing. And I just tried to imagine, how would I know anything about myself in a place like that? Because all I've got to compare myself to are the walls of my room. And even those walls don't have any behavior associated with them. You know, they're just inert. And I began to realize that as I thought about that being in that place, I actually need, in this physical realm anyway, I need all of the other things that show up in my life for me to have a relationship with. So even this cup of coffee here becomes something that I can relate to, right? People don't think of it that way, but I can now see something else besides the four walls, and I can compare myself to that cup of coffee. And I can say, well, I don't taste like that. I don't have this hard case, and I don't sound like that. So I can see that there are some differences between me and the coffee. Do you see what I'm saying? And this we begin to apply to everything in our world. And even if you think about this, imagine just your finger feeling something. What's actually happening when your finger feels something? Well, the nerve sensors are sending signals up here into my brain, and I'm somehow putting my hand out there and I say, yeah, this is happening out there. This is happening out there. Guess what that is? That's projection. So there may be nothing out there, and I'm still having this interior experience, and so I'm projecting it. That is how we live our lives in this physical realm. So that's why I like to make people aware of the idea of projection, and then start using it to help us understand who we really are. Now, Scott, you mentioned that you may not have been able to find those qualities in yourself, 5 or 10 years ago or something. Well, I will contest that. I believe that they were always there. It's just that maybe it took this one person in your life to help you start to feel those qualities and experience them. And if that person hadn't done it, maybe someone else would have done it somewhere along the way. So they're always there, because otherwise you wouldn't recognize it. That's something for us to remember too. What you spot, you got. Okay? And that's a powerful, powerful thing to remember. So in the process of all this learning, we're trying to live a physical life through this spiritual realm, or vice versa. It's very confusing, right? But what I have learned is I try to take all of the inputs that I can get in my physical body and use those to inform and commune with my soul and try to get to the truth that way. And this is one of the ways that I use to get more clarity about who I really am. And when I get clarity about who I really am, I understand that I am self-love, that I am compassion, that I am forgiveness, that I am gratitude, that I am joy. All of those things are aspects, qualities of the fullness of who I really am. This is a powerful, powerful learning. And I hope all of you can get something from this, and everybody who's on the show or watching the recording, because believe me, we really need this whole world to start lifting up. Anyway, so that's where the idea came from, and I just wanted us all to have a visceral experience of self-love through the power of projection.
Thank you, David. Yeah, there's no two ways about that. I don't remember feeling love, but
Right.
I really got a sense within that, but coming from that very little one within me.
There you go.
And for those that are very open to spirit guides, Gillian just happens to be one of my spirit guides. And the sense that came to me was, she loved me so much. She was a spirit guide that chose to come and meet me in person.
Mm.
That is how much love there is out there for each and every one of us.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And even if you think about the quantum physics side of things, do you mind if I go off on a little tangent here?
You're on a roll, baby.
It came to me
Go for it.
recently, trying to understand how much power does each human being actually have through the power of love. And as I was meditating and contemplating this, I was brought to the awareness of about 99% of the universe is just energy. And most of that is what we call dark energy or something similar. And what's really, really interesting, that scientists now have been doing experiments, and they have somehow, don't ask me how they do this, they have figured out that there is on the order of 10 to the 100th joules of power in 1 cubic centimeter of empty space. Now, 10 to the 100th joules of power, it's a massive amount of power, a massive amount of energy. That's 1 cubic centimeter. How many cubic centimeters do you think there are in the universe? There are a lot. It's not a countable number. Well, it's countable. It's finite probably, but it's not something that we can easily count. But then I thought, well, a cubic centimeter. How many cubic centimeters are there in a typical human body? Whoa. Well, I guarantee there's more than one. All right. So what that means is each of us within ourselves has over 10 to the 100th joules of power within ourselves. And yet we think we're so small and insignificant and powerless and helpless. If we allowed our consciousness to rise high enough, we would know how to tap into that power and use it to serve the rest of the world, of the universe. And that all starts with, guess what? Self-love.
Yeah. Going back to your point about receiving and being that insecure person, that person who was always giving and never expected anybody to give to them because you were never worthy of that, etc., etc. But I remember asking a friend, I said to him, I'd like to ask you a favor, but you can say no if you want to. And I got a real ticking off for that. If I can do it, I will. If I can't, I won't. I will say so. But do not ever ask like that again. That, yeah, that's an insult. And it was just like, whoa, okay. So I asked, and the answer was actually yes. But at the same time, I received an angel oracle card, yeah, within a couple of days. And that was let yourself receive. But explained it slightly better. And that was, you have so much pleasure from giving to others. Give others the pleasure of giving to you.
Right.
And it was just like, okay. But that's also accepting self-love, that you are worthy to receive, you know, from others, but actually from yourself as well. Because you were talking about sort of that 1 cubic centimeter and whatever, but we are a physical size. I know some of us grow a bit, or we all grow from being a baby anyway. But our soul, the energy of our soul, is vast in comparison to this minute physical body.
Yep.
So we are absolutely amazing beings. And some of us have got to the stage where actually our vastness goes outside our physical being. And you can grow. You can connect with and grow outside your physical being. You're not limited by your physical being. And it's that tapping into the self-love, the love that you are.
Beautiful. Thank you. Gail, one of the things that you said early on in our conversation, something about we have a mistaken idea that self-love is somehow selfish. I know that we discussed some of these different myths about self-love. Do you want to just kind of walk us through some of that?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, we have these terms that are very similar, but a little bit different, with selfish and self-absorbed and self-centered and self-aware. And they're all kind of like these different shades, right? And I think that selfish is kind of the word that becomes the catch-all for all of this. But really, selfish is really being concerned about yourself, right? It can mean being concerned about yourself and lacking any sort of consideration for others. But it's really about putting yourself, my take on it anyway, is putting yourself first, taking care of yourself first. I had a client who, we were working in a session, and she had a new book coming out. She wanted to, you know, promote this new book. It was a little bit different than the other books that she was putting out. And the thing that was stopping her was this belief, or this idea, this resistance. And it came out when she said, the last thing I ever want to be called is selfish. And that was the thing that was blocking her for asking. And she, you know, she wanted to sell this book, but she wasn't even at that point yet. She was looking for beta readers for the draft. And that was stopping. I don't want to be seen as selfish. Well, this is different than the work that I've put out before. And me asking for this help will be selfish, right? And so where does that come from? Right. But she was cutting off her opportunities because of that fear of being judged as selfish. Right. And that's normal. We do that fear of judgment. But, you know, I see selfish and self-awareness as very similar qualities and slightly different shade of each other. Whereas, you know, self-centered, self-absorbed, that's really more about, it's more egocentric.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Well, and of course, the extreme expression of selfishness is narcissism, right?
Right.
That's people use that term pretty liberally as well these days. If you do anything that appears to be self-centered, then you're just a narcissist. Which I've reached this point now. I don't really care what people call me, you know, especially people that I don't know that much. You know, if someone like if one of you people called me a narcissist, I'd probably take that more to heart than if someone else did. I would say, well, these people know me better than all these other ones do, so maybe they see something that I don't see. It might hurt to hear it, but sometimes we gotta feel that pain in order to be able to do something about what needs to be done, right? So, I mean, there's lots that we can talk about here in terms of this myths about self-love or whatever. But I think the bottom line we have to understand is that if we're not, I think we had that quote in the write-up about love your neighbor as yourself, you know, the teaching of Jesus. And he said that was the second most important commandment of all. Well, when he said love your neighbor as yourself, I mean, he didn't say just love your neighbor.
Mm.
It's really important for us to remember that. He said love your neighbor as yourself. So you are just as important as your neighbor is. You're not more important, and neither is your neighbor. You are both equally important. This is something that we just tend to overlook. You know, we think that if I'm taking care of myself, then I'm somehow making myself more important than everybody else. Well, that's not necessarily true. It might be true, but not always. So I think we need to acknowledge that self-love, if once I love myself, I am better able to love my neighbor. That's how I read it.
Isn't it also?
We all have something to say about this.
Isn't it also about you cannot pour from an empty pot? Yeah, for those people that care for others, if you don't actually take care of yourself, you are not going to be there for others.
That's right.
But I was raised a Catholic. No one ever took that saying and said, you are absolutely meant to love yourself so that you can love others in that way. It was always about others. It was never about self. And it wasn't until you said it when we were having a discussion, it was just like, for goodness sake, how old are you, Sarah? How much of the Bible did you have shoved down your throat as a child and as an adult?
Exactly.
An adult. And it had never, ever, because we weren't taught to think about anything within the Bible like that. So sorry, carry on.
Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, wow. I hope that anybody listening to this gets 10% of anything that's been thrown out here, because it's absolutely wonderful. So 2 quick things. I do a day of Reiki. I work with a local hospice, and the Reiki is not for clients, but for nurses, staff, directors, doctors. I go there for a day and I do Reiki for them. These people are at end of life. They are gifted. It is an art form. It is something that I never thought that I could deal with until I had my losses. But they give and give and give, and they feel that it's so wrong to receive. So one of the things that I try to do, it's only half-hour sessions, but for 20 minutes, they get just me time. And they are so grateful, so thankful, because they don't give that to themselves. And I keep telling them, you can't give the best you unless you are filled. Like you said, Sarah, you can't pour from an empty pot. And so that's what I hope to give to them, so that they can give to their clients, to the people that they're dealing with at end of life, because it takes an enormous amount of energy in order to be in those situations. So it's the second point I wanted to make was for everybody, allow. We don't allow a lot of things. We try to make things happen. We push to have them happen. We want to manifest. We want to, we want it in our time, of course, but allow. When we allow the time, when we allow the breath, when we allow the compassion to come through, when we allow the understanding to come through, we are so much better people to ourselves, and then we can be so much better to everybody else.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well, we're getting close to our end time here, and I just want to open the floor a little bit for some suggestions about how we can improve our practice of self-love. If you have some ideas about what people can do, please share them out.
I always teach a tool with all of my clients. I always teach them a tool to be able to, for them to self-heal. And in doing that, they self-discover. And in doing that, they learn to accept more and more of themselves. Whether it is just taking 10 minutes in the morning and doing breath work. Meditation, in every practice I've ever talked to, meditation, whatever form that takes, whether you're listening to a podcast, whether you're listening to a guided meditation, whether you're sitting in silence, whether you're sitting in a dark room, whether you're sitting in the backyard with a cup of tea, listening to the birds, all forms of meditation. But meditation means quiet, so that you can see that part of you and allow that to come out. That's the biggest, for me, the biggest tool that anybody I work with takes away.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sarah.
Listen to your heart. Just listen to your heart. And one of the ways...
And you mean more than just listen to the heartbeat?
Oh, listen. Yes, yes, absolutely. It's about listening to what you feel is really speaking to you, which your gut, your sort of your intuition, your instincts. You sort of be spontaneous. Just allow. But one of the things, because I work with sound and I work with toning and I work with the voice. Now, you haven't got to do this with a tone, or some people would say it's singing, but for me, it's not, it's toning. But just say your own name. Think of, many people said, I don't like my name, I hate my name. That's because when we've heard our name, especially as a child, somebody wants something, we're in trouble, it always felt, or most of the time it felt negative. And as humans, we are very good at remembering the negative feelings rather than the lovely positive feelings. So just repeat your name. You are asking nothing of yourself. You are just acknowledging yourself and
Nice.
honoring the whole of who you are. And you are just saying, I acknowledge you for who you are. So try it. It will work for some. It probably won't work for others. But you know what? Just my suggestion is try it. I tone my name for myself every day. I acknowledge myself every day.
Beautiful. Thank you. Gail.
Yeah, I feel like I have different tools for different places of where people are at. So if this is kind of a new concept for you, something that a colleague of mine shared with me many years ago that sounded silly when I heard it, but I have this curiosity thing, and so I'm game for trying anything, right? Pretty much anything. So even though I was like, oh, really, if this is really breaking into new territory for you, simply taking your fingers, your index finger and your middle finger, and I don't know if you guys can see, but just tapping on your heart, and she called this your love button. Just tapping on your heart and standing in front of a mirror, looking yourself in the eyes while you're tapping on your heart and saying, I love you. And you could even say your name with it, right? And just doing that every day for however, you could do it for 7 days, you could do it for a whole month, however long you need to do it. And it's quick It's an easy thing to do. It feels a little awkward at first if you're not, if you're not comfortable with this whole concept of loving on yourself, right? But that really helped me start to begin to shift into, some more intense and deeper practices. In particular, inner child work is just magnificent, as you know, Sarah, for really starting to open up and connect with loving on yourself in a much deeper way. So give it a try.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gail. Well, everyone, our time is up. I just want to say thank you all for being here, and thank you for sharing all the wisdom about self-love. I would like to just remind folks that you can see the recording of this and every other episode of Soul Empowerment on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. Meanwhile, this is David McLeod and Gail Nowak and Scott Holmes and Sarah Jane wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time on Soul Empowerment. Bye-bye.